Immunity. The concepts in immunity will be local infection and systemic infection. Immunity is defined as a physiological process, excuse me, that provides an individual with protection or defense from disease. It's a characteristic that allows a person to be resistant to a particular disease or condition. But this definition might be a little easier to understand. Immunity is the normal physiological response to microorganisms and proteins, as well as conditions that are associated with an inadequate or excessive or inappropriate immune response. Immunity is accomplished through the immune system, which is comprised of cells, tissues, and organs that protect the body from attack by foreign antigens. What is an antigen? Well, an antigen is basically a protein that will elicit a response from the body. Foreign antigens might include microorganisms such as bacteria, viruses, parasites, or fungi. And foreign antigens may be proteins that are found in pollens, foods, bee, snake, or spider venom, vaccines, blood product transfusion, and transplanted tissues. We have two basic types of immunity. We have innate immunity and acquired immunity. Innate immunity is immunity protection that is present when we're born. It provides nonspecific responses that are not considered antigen specific. Acquired immunity is immunity that we obtain after birth. We have active acquired immunity, which will develop after the introduction of a foreign antigen, and it results in the formation of antibodies or sensitized T lymphocytes. For example, once our body is exposed to this foreign antigen, our body begins producing antibodies against it. We can get that through vaccinations. So we get a small dose of an antigen, and then our body will start developing the antibodies. So when we're exposed to those antigens, we are less likely to become ill, or we may have a decreased illness or decreased length of time of the illness. Or it can be after exposure to an infectious pathogen. Let's look at measles, for example. We are exposed to measles. Our body begins to produce the antibodies. We may contract the illness the first time that we're exposed to it. But now our body has antibodies, so if we're exposed to it again, we are protected from the disease a second time. Active acquired immunity will attack antigens through the antigen-antibody response. So we have two basic responses. The humoral response, which is through bone that produces the B lymphocytes, and the cell-mediated response, which is through the thymus gland that produces the T lymphocytes. The other type of acquired immunity is passive acquired immunity. This is where we have an introduction of preformed antibodies. In other words, our body's not forming the antibodies, we're receiving them through transfusion of immunoglobulin or naturally as from a mother to a fetus through the placenta blood transference or colostrum transfer during breastfeeding. The passive acquired immunity will provide only temporary immunity, but it can decrease the severity or duration of an illness. Then we have optimal and abnormal immune responses. An optimal response is where the immune system protects the body from the invasion of microorganisms. It removes dead and damaged tissue and cells and recognizes and removes cell mutations. Abnormal responses include a suppressed immune response and an exaggerated immune response. With a suppressed immune response, we refer to this as being immunocompromised or immunodeficient. There is an increased risk for infection and cancer if that immunosuppression has occurred over a long period of time. The exaggerated immune response will include allergic reactions, cytotoxic reactions, and autoimmune reactions. Remember, the auto means self. So when we look at the autoimmune reactions, a critical component of the immune system is the body's ability to tell the difference between itself and non-self. And if that piece of the immune system is broken or altered, the body will begin to attack itself. And that's what leads to the autoimmune diseases and disorders. So the functions of immunity are to protect the body from the invasion of microorganisms and other agents, to remove those dead or damaged tissue and cells, and recognize and remove cell mutations that have demonstrated abnormal growth and development. All of this is accomplished through the skin boundary surfaces, which include the mucous membranes, the enzymes, natural microbial flora, and complement proteins. And that's our first line of defense of the immune system. The second line of defense involves phagocytes activity, the natural killer T lymphocytes, granulocytes, and macrophages. The third line of defense is the antibodies that are formed from the B lymphocytes and the T lymphocytes. For the immune system to function correctly, the immune system has to be able to tell the difference between itself and those foreign proteins. If it does not function correctly, this will cause immunosuppression or immunodeficiency, resulting in infection or disease. It does lead to the immune system attacking itself, and that's that autoimmune response. Or it will lead to that hyperactive immune response. So components of the immune system include mechanical, which are going to be physical barriers. Once again, the skin and mucous membranes, normal flora, and mucus. The physiological reflexes such as sneezing, coughing, vomiting, that helps the body get rid of some of those pathogens, and macrophages. It also includes chemical components. These are natural biological substances that destroy or incapacitate pathogens. Examples will be the enzymes that are found in tears or saliva or mucus that are able to destroy pathogens. It includes antibodies that consume pathogens, and secretions such as white blood cells and other cells that produce interferon to manufacture antiviral proteins. Then we have the lymphoid organs, which include the bone marrow, the thymus gland, the spleen, tonsils, adenoids, and appendix. These are all connected by the lymphatic system and the circulatory system. The blood cells consist of the granulocytes, also known as the white blood cells, and they include the neutrophils, monocytes that will become macrophages, eosinophils, basophils, and mast cells. They include the B lymphocytes, the T lymphocytes, and natural killer cells. The B lymphocytes will secrete antibodies or immunoglobulins following exposure to an antigen. They work with the helper T lymphocytes, and the B lymphocytes will then produce copies of those antibodies or immunoglobulins. The immunoglobulins, I'm not asking you to memorize these, but include the IgG, which is the primary immunoglobulin, and it will coat the antigen. This will help improve that immune response. And it binds to the macrophages and the neutrophils to improve phagocytosis. The IgD is found within the cell membrane of the B lymphocytes. The IgE is responsible for the allergy symptoms and the increase in the presence of parasitic worms. The IgA is found in high concentrations in body fluids, the tears, saliva, and secretions from the respiratory and gastrointestinal tracts. And IgM remains in the blood and kills bacteria. It's the first antibody produced with an initial immune response. The phagocytes are going to recognize and ingest foreign antigens, and this includes the macrophages and the neutrophils. The macrophages, which are better phagocytes than the neutrophils, are going to be stored in the connective tissue, spleen, liver, and the lining of the GI and respiratory tracts, while the neutrophils circulate in the blood system. Then we have the complement system, which is comprised of 25 proteins that circulate in the blood, and this includes cytokines. Cytokines will include 6 different things: the interleukins, the interferons, the growth factor, the tissue necrosis factor, the colony stimulating factor, and chemokines. The complement system is involved in that cascade of interactions when an antigen antibody is encountered by improving the immune response. It's also involved in the dilation and the ultimate leaking of fluid from the vascular system that will cause the erythema or redness and the edema or swelling of the inflammatory process. And then we look at the T lymphocytes. There's 3 primary groups. We have the helper T cells, which regulate the functions of the immune system. We have the cytotoxic T cells, which are also known as killer cells, that directly kill foreign antigens and may kill self cells. And then we have the suppressor T cells that help prevent a hyperimmune response by suppressing the function of the helper and cytotoxic T cells. Suppressed immune responses include immunosuppression or immunodeficiency. It significantly increases the risk for infection as the body is less able to fight microorganisms. We have primary immunodeficiency, which means the entire immune defense system is inadequate, and the individual is missing some, if not all, of the components needed for a complete immune response. Secondary immunodeficiency, we have a loss of immune functioning that has resulted from an illness or a treatment in someone that previously had a normal immune function. We can create that secondary immunodeficiency with medications or some treatments such as radiation. There's also some cancers such as multiple myeloma, Hodgkin's disease, and non-Hodgkin's lymphomas that can cause immune system dysfunction. With the exaggerated immune response, we have 4 different classifications of hypersensitivity disorders. We have type 1, which is an IgE-mediated or atopic allergic disorder. We have type 2, which is a tissue-specific or cytotoxic disorder. Type 3 is an immune complex-mediated disorder. And type 4 is a cell-mediated or delayed hypersensitivity disorder. These disorders can be localized or they can be systemic. And they also cause the release of histamine, which is why hypersensitive responses are treated with antihistamines. Think about it for a second. We have our seasonal allergies that cause that red eyes, the runny nose, the nasal congestion. Those are all initiated by that release of histamines. So we treat it with antihistamines. An anaphylactic reaction is a systemic hypersensitivity response that causes vasodilation, and if untreated, it can be fatal. The autoimmune responses is where, once again, that immune system fails to recognize itself and attacks its own cells. It can affect any tissue. Genetics can be a factor. Stressors, such as being ill or maybe being too tired, etc., can trigger an exacerbation, which is a worsening of the disease process. Autoimmune diseases are not curable, but clients are able to have remissions and exacerbations.